Welcome back, quilty friends. This is video 3 in the series about the Snowman quilt and pillow. This is probably the most fun one because you're actually going to put your face onto your snowman block that looks like this. How you arrange your face is completely up to you, the angle of the nose and how far apart the eyes are. There's no pattern for that. It's up to you to make it look like you want it to look. What you'll be looking for is packet 3. It says step number 3. Inside you will find a piece of Steam-A-Seam, which is a double-sided fusible product. You will find the directions on how to use it, although I'm going to show you today, but in case you forget or you want to read on your own, there's directions in here. And then you'll find some scraps of black and orange fabric. You can use these however you want and make whichever noses and eyes you want. You will also find these 2 template sheets. The one with the larger ones is for the quilt, which is what we'll be using today. The smaller one is for the pillow. Okay, so we're going to put the pillow one aside because we're going to use the one for the quilt today. All right, the first thing that we need to do is we need to have a piece of Steam-A-Seam, and I've pre-cut it approximately the size of the nose that I want to use, and I'm going to use this nose right here. So the very first thing you do is you trace this onto the piece of double-sided fusible. And with Steam-A-Seam, you want to put, there's a light yellow grid, you want to put that down. You want the nose to be traced onto the plain side, not the grid side. You can use a pencil, a pen, it doesn't matter. This isn't going to come off, but it doesn't matter because you're going to peel it away eventually. This is just for you to cut on. So I'm just tracing. And there's my nose. And now what I do is I peel away the back, the piece that has the grid on it. This is probably the most challenging part of this, is to get it started. But once you get it started, it comes off really easily, and what you'll feel is it feels kind of like a sticky note, so that it has a little bit of stickiness to it. So now I can put this onto, I can line it up or put it on my piece of fabric. Okay, and it kind of sticks there. And this is hanging off, so I'm going to cut that away because I don't need all this. All right, now the next thing you probably need is some type of pressing cloth. I like these silicone ones because this won't stick to it. Because if a little bit of the sticky comes out, then if I do it on my pressing mat, it'll leave residue on my pressing mat or on my ironing board. So I put it between the pressing cloth like this, and I do this. Now we do have some of these for sale in the shop, but the honest truth is this one is an oven liner, and you can get those on Amazon, much less expensive, or maybe even at your local dollar bill store or Walmart or, okay? Now it's stuck together. So now I can just cut this out very easily, and I have a perfect nose shape. This is one of my favorite parts because I always liked paper dolls, so. All right, now I'm ready to fuse this, and I would normally be fusing it onto my face here. And then I would also want my eyes ready to go. So since I don't have that and I want to show you how to do this, I'm just going to fuse this onto this scrap piece of fabric here. And again, the challenge of getting the paper started coming off. But once you get it started, it comes right off. And again, you'll have a slightly sticky surface so that it'll kind of stay where you put it for you to arrange it. So see how it kind of sticks to my fingers, but yet, so that makes it really easy to rearrange the noses and eyes on my piece when I really want to do it. But for right now, we're just going to make a sample. Okay? So again now, I'm going to go put it underneath the pressing mat, and And now this time I'm gonna let it cool a little before I pick it up, because sometimes if you pick it up too soon, then the sticky lets go. And I don't want the sticky to let go this time because I want it to stay on there. I don't want to use any pins or anything while I sew it. All right, this is cooled off, so now I can pick it up and see it's really stuck on there. All right, next thing is we have to decide how we're going to stitch around this. And we actually have 3 options. I like to use a blanket stitch, and on this machine, a blanket stitch is number 47. So a blanket stitch takes 2 or 3 stitches straight and then a stitch that I call a bite. So what I want is I want the straight stitches right along this edge, and I want the bite to go onto the nose. Now normally I would do this with thread that matches the nose, so I would use an orange thread. But today I'm going to use a black thread so it's easy for you to see what's happening. Okay, now, the most challenging part is to get it to stay around this curve and then to turn where the little point of the nose is. So I'm going to start about here so you can watch me do the curve, and come down here so you can watch me do this. But what I'm doing the whole time is, first of all, I'm sewing slowly, and I'm counting in my head. 1, 2, bite. 1, 2, bite. So I'm aware that where the bite is. And when I do the bite, I never want to pivot from the time it takes the bite here till it comes back. I want it to come straight back. So I'm pivoting when it's in the straight stitch area. Okay, so I'm pivoting when it's straight stitching, never when it takes the, you can do it for the bite over, but you can't do it for the bite back, because you want the bite back to come exactly right back over it to be straight. You'll see as I do it. Okay, I suggest that you make yourself a sample like this and play a little bit. First of all, to get used to sewing it, but also to decide whether you like the stitch length and width of what's happening here, and to make sure you have the correct blanket stitch. All right, remember that if you look here, the stitch length is going to determine how far in between the bites it is. The stitch width is going to determine how deep the bite goes into the nose. So I've done this before, so I know that a width of 3 and a stitch length of 2 works well on these pieces. Okay, but that's what you need to play with at home. So make yourself a sample nose out of scrap fabric and try this before you actually try it on the nose that you're going to put on your...
Does everyone's machine do this the exact same way?
Okay, if you have a blanket stitch, maybe not, because sometimes a blanket stitch is 3 stitches in between, sometimes it's 2. So that's why I'm telling you to discover that before you start to do it on your actual piece. The other thing is, you want to be sure that you have long tails, because you're not going to backstitch. You're going to tie them off. So you want to bring your bobbin thread up. So if you have a machine that cuts it off, you're not going to use your cut button. You're going to do it the old-fashioned way. You're going to bring your bobbin thread up. You're going to leave these long tails so that I can tie those off. All right? Well, I'll show you that when we're done. All right, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to get started right on the edge of my nose. All right, and I'm going to slow this down. All right, watch. 1, 2, bite over, bite back. 1, 2, bite over, bite back. All right, now I need to pivot a little bit, and don't be afraid to raise your presser foot to help you pivot. 1, 2, bite over, bite back. Pivot a little bit. 1, 2, bite over, bite back. Okay, and you're going to keep slowly doing this. And remember, you only want to pivot when it's doing a straight stitch. So see, you can pivot in between the two straight stitches. You just can't pivot when it's doing the bite. Because see, the bite comes exactly back into the place where it started from. And that's what you want to happen. Otherwise, you'll have a gap there, and you'll notice that. And obviously, with my black thread, it would be way more noticeable. But remember, I said don't use black thread, or white thread. Use orange thread that matches the nose. Okay, and you can use, if you have just some all-purpose thread, it doesn't have to be the piecing thread that you usually use. It can be a decorative thread, so you could use an embroidery type thread, something a little shiny, but you do want it to match. Okay, I'm gonna stop here and show you about how to tie this. And we want the needle up, and we're gonna pull this away, and again, we're gonna leave long tails.
Do you ever sew faster than that when you're appliquing?
Not really. Maybe as I come to this straight area, I might sew a little bit faster, but not if I have any kind of pivot to do or coming to a corner. All right, I'm on the back side. I'm gonna take the bobbin thread and I'm gonna wiggle it and move it a little bit, and then you'll see a loop. And I have a seam ripper here, but I do not wanna cut this thread. I'm just using it to, you can use a pin also. When you see the loop, you pull that loop, and now I have both the bobbin and the top thread here, and I just tie knots. Okay, so I'm going to tie knots, and then I can snip these threads off. I don't want to snip them exactly close, but I can snip them. There's my snippers. I can snip them a little closer. Again, see, if I wiggle this thread, I can get the bobbin thread, and it comes up, and I tie knots. All right, now we're going to go down to the point of the nose. We're going to see how to do that. All right, so now there's no threads here, and I haven't had to backstitch so that you'd see a heavier amount of thread there. All right, now let's do again, I'm going to pull these threads long, and I want to be sure, I don't want them to get tangled, so I want to be sure that they're straight behind. All right, now my stitch it appears to be like it's going to take a bite to begin with. So I'm lining up the edge. There's a break in my foot. Or if you see the little red triangle, it's the right edge of the triangle with the edge of my fabric. And I think this is going to start with a bite. It did. You can usually tell by the needle position. So again, to me, the hardest part of appliquing is being able to see the edge of the fabric. Because sometimes as it's under that foot, it can be hard to see where the exact edge of the fabric is. All right, I'm getting toward the point, and I really only want to go as far as the width. I can probably do one more bite. Okay, now I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to take my 2 stitches, and I need to adjust a little bit. And there I have a bite over. I'm going to bring a bite back, and now I'm going to take one more stitch, and I'm at the point, and I'm going to turn it, and now it's going to take another stitch and a bite. But remember, I'm using black thread. This would be orange thread, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. You have to adjust a little as you're going. All right, I'm going to bring this up. Now see, it kind of framed the point of the, but if that were orange thread, it would be even less obvious. I would do the same thing here. I would clip this. I would bring them to the back and tie them. Okay, but of course, I would have done this as one entire thing. And I would have started here on a long side so that it would have been very obvious to me where I was coming, where I could end. When I got here, my hope would be that I could take a couple, I would end with the two stitches, not the bite. So I could end with the 2 stitches right up against maybe 2 stitches here, because remember, when I'm going to bring this over and pull it, I can remove 1 or 2 stitches if I need to. So I would give myself a couple stitches to work with to do that. The other thing is, when I started, I would have started and come to about here, and then I would have left the needle down, raised the presser foot, and I would have flipped this over, and I would have already tied this knot. So when I come back over here, my threads don't get tangled as I bring my ending thread over my beginning thread.
So you would have left it attached to the machine?
Yes.
And tied the knot?
Yes. I would have gotten this, like maybe if I started here, I would have gotten to over here. I would have left my needle down, raised my presser foot, and I would have worked to flip this over enough while it was on the machine to tie my beginning threads. So when my ending threads came over, they didn't get tangled with my beginning ones. Okay? Again, remember that we're always here. If you want to come in and try some of your applique with us to help you, we'd be glad to do that. Okay, if your machine does not have a blanket stitch, the next best thing would be a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to change this to a zigzag stitch, and same thing, I'm going to show you. It's pretty much the same idea. In this case, again, you would have orange thread on here, and what you want to do is you want to keep the zigzag pretty much on the nose. So you're going to barely make the zigzag just touch the edge of the nose. Okay, now, in this case, it doesn't matter where you pivot, because you don't have to worry about the bite lining up. But you don't want to leave it go so that you're pivoting, like you don't want to have to pivot this much. You want to be doing a gentle pivot all along. So you want to pivot every couple of stitches so that your zigzag doesn't look distorted. Okay, and I'm too far away here. But I'm trying to sew kind of, usually, because Megan has got the phone here, I can't really bend over and see where I'm at. So I'm having a hard time seeing the edge of the fabric here. So let me see if I can get back where I should be to show you. I'm trying to maneuver it back on, because you really want to be where you're just barely, so that when you come to the right, you're on the white fabric, but just barely on the white fabric. Here, we're better. This is looking a little better. I'll show you. There's not room for me, the camera, or the phone, and Megan and me to be able to see.
We need a selfie stick.
We do need a selfie stick. Maybe Santa will bring us one for Christmas. All right, let's take a look here. The same thing would apply. You would leave long threads, and you would tie them off on the back. Whenever you applique, you don't want to back stitch. Okay, we're a little closer. You remember, again, you can make this a little smaller if you want to, if that makes it easier. Let's give that a try. Let's see if we make it a little smaller, if that looks. This is actually the nose for the pillow, so it's much smaller. So I probably should have made this. No, I'm too far in. So it's a matter of figuring out on your machine or on your foot. That's probably a little bit better width. So you want it a little smaller. The other thing that you can do is you can do a regular straight stitch. Okay?
It's on 81.
Oh, that would have been a surprise. Okay, and when you do the straight stitch, you want it just barely, just want it to be even and all around. It's called raw edge applique. And you just want to be, you're just sort of making a line that's going to hold this in place. The steam seam will keep it in place pretty much, and you're just giving it a little extra help. So you're just stitching a line, sort of decorative, sort of functional, all the way around. What happens is, if by any chance this should let go, if the steam seam on the edge should let go and you get a little fraying, it can only fray this far. So that's the idea, that it'd be a little roughly edge after maybe 10 washings or so, and the steam seam lets go and it starts to, and it would have like a ruffled effect on the edge. But that the nose can't completely come off because you've stitched it down. Okay, mostly it's finding out with your machine exactly, and with the foot that you want to use, exactly where it is. But like I said, my preferred method is blanket stitch, but I would, if you've never done this before, I would give it a try and try to see what works best for you and what you like the look of. Okay, that's the noses. Now the eyes, you can do exactly the same thing. You have a template here on each of your, both the small one and the large one, and you can do the same thing. You can trace this onto steam seam, and you can do the applique just like you did here. You can use the same stitch that you used on the noses, or you can use a different stitch. That's up to you. The face is definitely the place where you make some decisions and use your own creativity. That's why we didn't pre-cut the noses or eyes for you. I didn't do that. I used a new product called Applique, and Applique come in a little package like this, and you get 2 of these little rings with all these little silver rings on them. And what I liked about them is it was very easy for me to fussy cut. So what I did was I found the size I wanted, and now I need both of these to make my eye, and I'm gonna make the eye for the larger Santa or snowman. And it's gonna end up being the size of the inner ring. Okay, it looks as if both of these are the same, but there's a slight variation in size from one set of rings to the other. Okay, so I used this one for the eye. And again, you can make bigger eyes if you want to, it doesn't matter. But what I liked was I could put this on here and decide that I wanted one of these little X's as the middle of the eye. So what I did was I put it on there and I laid it down like this, and then this one goes over it. And you kind of push and it'll kind of snap into place. It's not meant to snap into place but enough that then I could take it and I could see how it looked on the other side. So let's do that again, because now okay. I know what my problem is. I'm doing it the wrong way. Goes this way. That's why it won't snap in. Okay, so I'm going to put it where I want it centered and then push. Okay, and now it's kind of snapped into place, and then I can look over here, but this is the center of my eye. So I don't like that. It's not quite centered. So I'm going to do it again. I should be doing this over here because I'm going to need the iron. Actually, it works better on here because okay. Now, I'm going to take and I'm going to cut this off, and I'm kind of using the outer ring as a guide. but it doesn't have to be perfect because this isn't gonna matter. This is just gonna get tucked in, okay? Now I'm gonna take my steam iron, and you need steam. And I'm just gonna start to get, now be aware, the steam is hot, and so do the rings get hot. So I'm barely touching them here, okay? Once I've kind of got just a little bit of a, now I'm gonna take some best press. And best press is kind of a starchy idea. And now, as you can see, the best press is making it stay in place. Now you gotta be careful because everything here is hot.
We sell Best Press in the shop, but we also, if you bring in an old bottle of Best Press that's empty, we will refill it, and the refill is cheaper than buying a whole new bottle.
Okay, now I'm going to take the steam off because now I want to dry the best press. I just work my way around, and what's important here is, as you can see, I'm creating a really nice crease as I do this. What I liked about this method versus just flat applique for the eyes is it seemed to, because all this is trapped underneath, it seemed to give the eyes just a little more dimension. Made them a little, they weren't so flat as the noses. Okay, now I gotta wait a minute because that is too hot to handle because these rings are metal. Okay, and notice that the rings are on these nice, very easy to open and close so they don't get lost. Especially that teeny little one there, I'd for sure lose that one. Okay, this is still kind of hot, but I'm gonna pop it out. And then I'm gonna pop out this. And now I'm gonna give this one last press. And look at there. I have a nice, beautiful circle with nice turned edges. Now what I did was I put this onto the face, and I did do the blanket stitch around it, but you could very easily do a straight stitch as well because now you don't have raw edges. Okay, the other thing I did was I used some of this little stitch witchery, which works very much like the steam-a-seam, and I just put a little piece in the middle, cut it off, did it, took the paper off, and then it at least stayed in place while I appliqued it onto my face. The other thing is, if you don't have this, you have some leftover steam-a-seam, you can cut a piece of the steam-a-seam that'll fit. You don't want it to come out the edges, but all you need is enough to hold this in place while you applique it down. One last tip about applique. If you're having trouble, if it seems like your stitches are pulling, everything isn't laying flat when you applique, you might use some stabilizer. And stabilizer is like thick paper, but it tears away when you're done on the back. So it can help everything to lay flat. I didn't have any trouble. It seemed like between the steam-a-seam and the layers of fabric, it was fine. But if your machine doesn't seem to want to make everything lay flat, you can try using a tear-away stabilizer. The other thing that you might try is you can mess with the tension on your machine a little bit. Some machines, when they do a decorative stitch, you need sometimes to make the tension a little less. So you might try just loosening the tension just a little bit if you're having trouble with things laying flat. Again, if you have any questions, if you're having problems, feel free to come into the shop. We'll be glad to help you. Be sure that you bring your problem child with you so we can see what it is that's happening, and we can give you some tips and tricks, or you can come in the back and we can help you to sew those things down. The next video will be about actually sewing your quilt together, because once you get the faces on, you have everything you need. You have 4 faces done and 9 patch blocks done, and it's time to sew those together and add borders, and you will have a quilt. Okay, it's a really simple, easy project, and I hope you are enjoying it as much as I did.